There.
All righty. Should we just get, do we have more folks coming or should we just get going?
There's quite a few registered, but if we are recording it, then we can probably hit the road running.
Okay. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to this afternoon's webinar, Is ERP-2 Right For You? I'm Sarah Wuta. I'm working with Renewing the Countryside and Go Farm Connect on this, on getting the word out about ERP-2. And we have with us also Ryan Pesch, who works for the University of Minnesota and is going to talk about records that you might need and how to help you get those together. So if you want to do next slide, Ryan.
Yeah.
So ERP-2 is the Farm Services Agency Emergency Relief Program, and it's revenue-based. So it's based on the income that you expected to have in disaster 2020 or 2021 years. And that is for losses of eligible crops, which includes pretty much anything but crops intended for grazing. So we're talking about fruits, vegetables, field crops, grains, anything like that. But if it was a crop intended for grazing, is not eligible, and it does not include livestock either. And we'll look at qualifying disaster events. So a qualifying disaster event is something like wildfires, hurricanes, and derechos, which we don't have here, floods, excessive heat, winter storms, freezes, qualifying drought, and then, we're looking at hail damage. We're looking at anything that really damaged your crop that was weather related. And for the qualifying drought, there are counties that have been identified in Minnesota and Wisconsin as having suffered a qualifying drought or experienced a qualifying drought. And that, Sarah, can you drop that in the chat, or we will email that to all of you afterwards if we can't get it dropped in the chat. But so thinking about if your farm experienced any of these natural disasters in 2020 or 2021, you may be eligible for ERP-2. And then this is kind of just a basic, we've kind of tried to take some of this information and simplify it. So looking at this decision tree, you want to start in the upper left. Did you farm crops?
The cursor there? Yeah.
Yes, that's very fancy.
Good.
Thank you. If you didn't, then you're not eligible for ERP-2. If you did, moving over to that big fat rectangle, then if, did you experience a qualifying natural disaster, as discussed, that affected your revenue? The answer is, if it's no, go ahead and stop. If yes, did you lose projected revenue due to natural disaster and or drought? Now here you have some options. You can go up to no, and then you stop. You can go over to the right, which is yes. And then the next question is, did you file a Schedule F in 2018 or 2019? And then if yes, you can contact your local FSA office or a connector, so somebody on our team that can help you apply, to go ahead and get your applications in. Everything you need to apply in terms of financial records should be on that 2018 or 2019 Schedule F. Then if you lost projected revenue due to natural disaster and or drought, and 2020 or 2021 was your first year farming, then if you have planning materials or records that indicated your projected revenue for, that's supposed to say 2020 or 2021, we can work with you to help get those into the form they need to be so that you can apply. Yep, that Willalyn, thanks for that question. So if you did farm but didn't file a Schedule F, if you have planning materials or records that indicate what you expected to make in one of those years, and that could be things like crop plans, you know, if you had contracts for any wholesale, if you had farmers markets that you were signed up for, we can help you. We have Ryan and Eric on the team to help you get that together in order to apply. And so then if you go down to that no, if you don't have those records, you can contact a connector and we can help you get set up with keeping your records so that next time something like this comes up, you are ready to go ahead and apply for it. Does that make sense? And does anybody have any questions about this or where they might fall in this or how to explain this to somebody? Feel free to unmute and just shout out your questions. Nobody? Willilyn, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Okay.
Sarah, I have a question. This is Heather. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Hi, Heather.
All right. I'm driving. So I'm just curious if, you know, being that I'm new to all of this, if we do have someone that doesn't have the records and I'm not as experienced with as many of the people on the team, is there someone on the team that like we could refer them to? Should we refer them to Eric? Should we just contact the team and say, hey, I have a person up here that could really use some help with their records? Or is it something to where, because I don't want to fumble through and like set them up for failure. So is there like go-to people on our team that could help with that?
Yes, there are. Thank you for asking, Heather. So you can send them to Ryan or Eric. They are part of the team specifically working on ERP-2 around this record keeping piece. Yeah, you can send them directly to one of those two folks and their email addresses are at the end of this. Or they can reach out to info@GoFarmConnect and Sarah will get them in touch with Ryan or Eric. But in interest of having folks, you know, start keeping great records now, I think Eric and Ryan would be the best place to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, then I think I'm going to hand it over to Ryan to talk about the really fun stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it's super fun. I mean, dry and boring's okay sometimes too, right? So in an ideal world, we have all of our dry and boring farm records together and we have Schedule Fs and everything's all hunky-dory and we go see Cassie at FSA and she's like, this is great. You keep great records. This makes it very easy for you to apply to ERP-2. So the trick here with this thing is, like as Sarah said, this is a revenue-based program. So it really comes down to records showing where you were at and what's a benchmark year, and then that disaster year, right? So a benchmark year would be sometime before 20 and 21. So maybe a benchmark from 18 or 19. That would give a good sense about what you're typically doing in your farm. And so it's clear, like if, hey, in 2019, I did 40,000 in sales, and lo and behold, in 2020, I had hail and a flood and a rainstorm, and I only made $20,000. Well, it's very clear that you had this track record at a given revenue before the disaster years, and the disaster itself really was impacting what you were typically doing on your farm operation. So if we think about the records that our friends at FSA would need, for those of you that say have a Schedule F for a benchmark year, and for those disaster years, no problem, right? This is your record. Sarah did talk about some examples where, I keep admitting people, Sarah, talked about some examples that if you were new or you didn't have a Schedule F previously, there might be some other records that you could provide to show what was expected typically for your operation before this disaster year. So the two main points that you would need on records to show your eligibility for this program, one is your revenue for a benchmark year and those disaster years. But two, as Sarah said, this is only for crops only. Depending on if you're doing a Schedule F, you should be breaking out livestock sales separate from crops anyways. So that's maybe a moot point. But if you might need some assistance going back into your records to separate out any kind of livestock enterprise from a crop enterprise. So the crops are eligible, but the livestock stuff isn't. And this is where your own records or the records that your tax records from Schedule F would come into play. So in terms of how to prepare, hey, I already talked about the stuff at the top in terms of the information that you would bring to FSA to prove what your typical revenue was and how your revenue was affected in those disaster years. Or you're bringing forward some kind of record if you were new in 20 to 21, that would be an expected sales that fell short. There are also some FSA, some kind of typical FSA forms that are also part of this preparation, as well as a worksheet for ERP-2 that your FSA office will walk you through. And a lot of that worksheet really is walking you through those revenue portions to make sure that you're identifying the revenue that is eligible. And for the most part, it's if you were short in those disaster years from your benchmark years, that's the amount in terms of payment for the ERP-2, generally speaking. And so, again, it isn't just revenue. There are some other forms that are necessary that I'm not going to get into, not being an FSA person, but our friend Cassie is also here on the webinar as well. So,
Ryan, can you go back to that slide for just a moment?
Yeah.
And then I see Noreen has a question as well.
Oh, there we go.
So if you look in this kind of second list of forms, these are forms that you've generally filled out if you've worked with FSA. So once you fill them out, unless something changes, you don't need to keep filling them out every time you go into FSA. And then also highlighted, or in a different color at the bottom, is that they do have a form for farmers who are socially disadvantaged, beginning and veteran farmers, as defined by the USDA, that gives those folks, it may be a different type of payment for that, for different programs. So that's a reason to fill that form out if you are a person in one of those groups. And then I wanted to clarify something, and Cassie, maybe you can jump in here too. We have Cassie joining us from Minnesota FSA. But I know, Ryan, you mentioned that FSA can help you fill out that worksheet. And if I remember correctly, they can't, specifically because it would be providing guidance. Cassie, can you jump in and let us?
Correct. We actually aren't going to ask for any of this information, the Schedule F or profit or losses or financial records. We don't want a copy of those on file just because of the sensitivity of them, for number one. That is your private record. We need you to compute what your allowable gross revenue is. That isn't something we are going to do for you. Every operation is structured a little bit different for tax purposes. So it's really important that you understand your tax structure on what is reported when, or if you're getting commodity loans through FSA, if you're claiming that as income or you're not, those type of things. And just to, I guess, further make a point on the Schedule F, that is a great starting point, and that's a tool. But there are things that may be included on the line items that are being referenced in the form or worksheet or instructions that you're following that have to be subtracted out of there. They're not something that is actually allowable. So the Schedule F is a great starting point, but you might need some other documentation to determine what all comprise that entry on your Schedule F, because not all of those things may be considered allowable income or revenue for the purposes of ERP. So really, we need you to obviously compile your records, but you're also going to be the one that is computing what your allowable gross revenue is for both the benchmark and the disaster year or years.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Cassie. That's very helpful. Yeah, but there is a worksheet that does exist, and you know, I guess that is one main point to make is, you know, if you need some assistance in trying to figure out, okay, does this make sense for me to do and to apply to both myself and Eric Highmark, who's also here on this call. These are our email, and we're there to help you either help you break out your farm financial records so that you can apply and help work you through that worksheet so that you can identify what that eligible revenue is. Because we just want to do that right. And so that then you would be well prepared. Well, first you'd be able to make a decision. Does this make sense for me to do yes or no? And after that point, then you'd be well prepared to go into your FSA office to work with someone like Cassie in order to apply for ERP-2.
Did we get Noreen's question? I think we should let Noreen ask her question here.
Unmute here. So just, you know, I kind of plowed through this thing and I thought, well, I don't want to drive into the FSA office. I'm going to do this online. And you can learn from my mistake that don't do that, because if you make a mistake, they can't correct it at FSA. It's like held in kind of on the computer, so to speak. So darn it, because I hadn't taken out crop insurance premium out of my revenue for another person I'm working with. So if you do it online, you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot. I'm just sharing that because it happened to me. And veterans, you know, I have a son-in-law. I thought, well, or husband too, like, okay, veteran, yay, he's a veteran. And they said, nope, you have to be within 10 years of being discharged. Shoot, okay. So I hadn't heard that, so I just thought I'd share it because you can learn through my mistakes, if nothing else. Thanks.
Thanks, Noreen. You can't get everything right.
But Noreen, I just want to thank you for giving it a try, but you are correct. If you're entering it, you're initiating that application online. You're correct. You're the only one that has access to make corrections to those. That is the one downfall of it. It's convenient because you can do it from wherever you are. But we can assist in making those corrections. We just don't have access in that way. And you are correct in the veteran thing too. You have to be discharged within 10 years to be considered a veteran for that additional bump in payment factor. So thank you, Noreen, for bringing those things forward.
Thanks, Noreen and Cassie, for clarifying that. I just want to open up for questions.
Sarah, can you go back to the decision tree?
Yep, I think that Ryan's got those pulled up
Yeah,
there.
I'll bring it back up.
And actually, we should probably show where they can find that.
Yep, I dropped the link in the chat to the page on the Go Farm Connect website that will have this recording. It has the webinar that I'm looking at Eric's picture as I say that, that Brandon Dahl from FSA did. It's got this decision tree. And we can we'll put some more information up there, including that tool that FSA has. They have a nice ERP tool to help you break down kind of how to set this up if you want to try it without the help of Ryan and Eric. Does anybody have a
This is Heather, and I have another question. Of course, I'm on the bumpiest stretch on my commute, so hopefully you can hear me. This is probably maybe a dumb question, but I'm just thinking about my own self. Is this something where this is only for crops that are sold as like raw crops, or is this something to where if they're normally like making it into salsa or making it into pickles and selling it as cottage food, or maybe they're in a commercial kitchen setup or something like that? Can you include sales that you didn't make for things other than kind of the raw crop product of the farm type stuff?
Cassie, can you answer that? Because I'm getting PARP and ERP-2 confused in my brain right now.
And now that you say that, I am too. So just give me a minute, and Heather, I will quick glance through this and I will get you an answer. I apologize. I don't know that off the top of my head at the moment.
No problem. Thanks.
You know, it's a great question when they are looking it up. So good job. And PARP is the Pandemic Assistance Response. And I'm actually, I am going to stop your sharing for just a moment, Eric, or Ryan. And I'm going to go to the Go Farm Connect website and just walk you through. There is a disaster assistance tab on here. You're going to see that you can reach a disaster assistance connector. And this is the webinar with Brandon Dahl. And here's some of the different fact sheets with PARP and the ERP-2. But this is the decision tree that they were just sharing. And in here is the qualifying drought. Mind you, there are other assistance programs out there that are available. But for those counties that actually have drought, those are in here. And you can also connect with their specialist here. And then to find our connectors, you're able to go to this tab here and see who is working with us and learn more about Go Farm Connect.
Sarah, can you also maybe on the decision tree, because wasn't it required for ERP to have crop insurance for the next 2 years, or maybe Cassie can order that under ERP but not pandemic? Is that how it goes?
Correct. If you're applying for ERP phase 2, you have to agree to carry crop insurance for the next 2 years. That is a correct statement. And on Heather's question regarding like a value added post-production that was done to the crop, such as salsa, that would be considered eligible income if it was or could have been reported on a Schedule F.
And that's going to go back, Cassie, to how people choose to do their taxes, right? So if they're reporting on a Schedule C, that's going to be different.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. I'd like to speak to the crop insurance piece as well, which is something that we were going to dive into after June 2nd around this, because folks will need to be applying for that crop insurance for the next round, which I believe starts January 1st of 2024. Is that correct, Cassie? I believe that's the next round.
It really depends on what the crop is and what the sales closing date is. So there are some things that might be this fall yet. Some crops, the majority are going to be that March 15th date of next year. But there could be some crops that could potentially be this fall yet. But most of them will be next year sometime.
Okay. And for most of the folks that we will probably be working with, micro farm insurance, which is new, is probably going to be the one that is going to be for most of these smaller specialty crop producers. So, and it looks different than NAP, it looks different than traditional crop insurance, and it looks different than whole farm revenue. And so that's something that we'll be diving into after the June 2nd deadline.
And we are involved in a project with Minnesota Farmers Market Association on that, and I have been. We had a test case of a few operators looking at, the costs of microfarm for those that are typically not keeping crop insurance that are in specialty crops or doing some kind of value add and direct marketing. So we will have more information about what that looks like for those operators, in large part because it is very new. And in this audience, it's not common for people to have crop insurance really at all. And so, yes, if you are an applicant or you receive ERP-2, then there's requirement to have some kind of crop insurance. And Cassie, was it at a 60 or 50%? rate or so. It's something like that. It isn't necessarily at 75% coverage or 85% coverage or anything like this. It's a lower cost of coverage. But correct, Cassie?
Yes,
Yeah.
it would be, it's 6,100 for your traditional crop insurance or your whole farm, or I'm not quite as familiar with the micro farm, but I would assume it would be the same. It would be a little bit less if you were going to utilize our NAP program, and it would be 5,100
Gotcha. Very good.
for cap coverage.
And then with the whole, with the micro farm as well, there are some waiving of administrative fees for beginning farmers and some other pieces like that, again, that we'll dive into after the June 2nd deadline of ERP-2. But it's not a big, I think that at least when I was farming as a diversified vegetable farmer, crop insurance seemed really scary. And I think that this new micro farm is a lot more accessible for smaller producers. Any other questions? Okay, we can send you all a recording of this, as well as we'll include some links to some more information in here. And then as well as Ryan and emails, or my brain is dead at the end of the day. Ryan and Eric's emails and that general Go Farm Connect email address to help you get connected with any FSA programs. So Willilyn, do you suggest I should get crop insurance? That is a big question. You're an emerging farmer. What are you, let's see. Ryan, do you want to speak to this since you've done the work with the